All right. All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another session of Inside the Outhouse for Monday, the 4th of April. I had to look at my watch to check. Welcome along to severe weather and its consequences for outdoor programming this afternoon. First off, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognise the continuing connection to lands, waters and communities. We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders both past, present and emerging. And would like to acknowledge all the oligarchs. Pete Smith's out in the field. He might join us from location at USC later today. We'll hold our breath for that. But I'd like to acknowledge the continuing support and work of the oligarchs, which includes Cherie Mullins, who's in the room today, which is great to see, and all the other oligarchs who can't be with us today. A pretty small gathering. We thought this would be a good conversation to have in regards to just basically talking about the term that it's been here in Queensland. We've finished up for the at least I've finished up for the term, and lots of public and independent schools are really winding down or have finished as well for the Easter break, and having a reflection on the recent floods and I guess going back even further, the fires perhaps, and talking and gauging some considerations that you might have as a program coordinator or a venue manager or a venue owner or operator, or even if you're actually still in the field, so you're a facilitator of outdoor education or outdoor recreation learnings. What do you do when you encounter severe weather? What do you do when you have severe weather impacting on your program, and what are the consequences for that? So I'm just gonna maybe throw to Cherie initially, put her on the hot seat there, and she can maybe share a little bit about her recent experiences. I'll share some from my perspective from a school about cancellations and postponements, and we'll just have a free-flowing conversation. No specific burning questions, but just talking about where the sector is in terms of severe weather and how we're dealing with that.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I work for a company called Nature Philosophy, which is a private small business. So we've been affected quite greatly by the floods. Our main area is up in Coffs Harbour, and that's where a lot of our programs are. So most of our customers come from that area, which is becoming increasingly more difficult with all the flooding up there. So we've had to cancel or postpone several programs last year and this year. I was part of a program last year that we ended up getting flooded out in the middle of the program. And had to, we literally had to set up a pulley system across a river to like send everybody's gear across the river. And then we had to hike out like a long ways through somebody's back, like cow paddock. And it was quite the, I don't know, experience trying to get out of there. And a lot of our sites are like that as well. We've had lots of sites be really flooded or flooded out. We've had to change and find new sites that are maybe not as great as some of the ones that we like. We like more remote sites, but we've had to kind of settle for some slightly more built up ones, just so that we don't have to worry about flooding and canceling more programs. My kind of questions in this is like one of the issues that we've come across is that last minute cancellations because of rain, or even if participants, like the program's still going, but the participants can't come because they're flooded in. So we've had issues around, at what point do you balance, you need to, because we're a small business, we need to make up a certain amount of the cost of the program that we've already spent. When we have to cancel or somebody cancels like the week of or the week before or whatever it is, versus being compassionate and understanding that people are, obviously, especially the people in Lismore who've been hit really hard, and then, trying to be compassionate to them. So we've kind of had to play a little bit of a balancing game to come up with the best solution that's for our participants and keep them wanting to come back. I don't know if anybody else has some of those kind of similar issues, but maybe what do you do in those situations?
Yeah, you raise a good point, Cherie. I know one of the difficulties we've definitely had over the last couple of weeks and months is the losses attained from cancelling a program. Obviously, safety comes first with everything that we do, but at the same time, with businesses, there's a huge financial loss when a program is postponed. And one of the issues we've sort of noted here, in particular, New South Wales, where about 70% of our work is conducted expedition-based, is a lot of the government agency or landowners, just with camp fees and camp booking processes, don't necessarily have the ability, I keep getting told, the ability from a refund process for campsites booked or access that's been confirmed. So, you know, when you sort of look at each program, when it's postponed or lost, you know, you're talking a couple of $100, you know, each time just from camp fees. And then obviously thinking about looking after staff wages, especially if you're using casuals. With the industry, we want to try and look after everyone these days, not necessarily ringing them the day before and saying, sorry, that work you've got booked has now been cancelled. We still honour those wages, which is this year, which is a hard pill to swallow. So there's several you know, complications associated with that financial side. So I can definitely hear what you're saying there and relate to it.
Hey, Keith, just for the audience, can you explain where you're calling in from and who you work for? And so you got your "We Are Well Ready" behind you, which is a Duke of Ed logo, I think.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, Keith McReynolds, CEO of Youth Advance Australia and Remote Safety Solutions. Youth Advance Australia, we're an open award centre for Duke of Ed across the country. So we are one of the first commercial operator here in Australia offering it under a commercial model. So we mostly take university students, kids that are not attached to an award centre, and we put them through the award. We also run the adventurous journey component as well, along with residentials and adventurous projects. And then my other business, Remote Safety Solutions, is a training business that specialises in remote area emergency management training. So everything from first aid through to remote area emergency, you know, chainsaw, four-wheel drive, working around helicopters, that type of stuff. So where there's a big component of my business, whether it's the adventurous journey side with Duke of Ed, or even just accessing various parts of the country with remote safety solutions. So getting in at cattle stations, Arnhem Land, Kimberleys, that sort of stuff. So it's a good topic to join you guys for the first time. So it's a pleasure to be here.
So maybe I can ask a question back to Cherie's initial point, and probably definitely linking to what Keith was just sharing. I also found that our first scheduled bronze award trip this year, and I had 31 brand new intakes into the bronze course within the school I work for, and about 8 going on for silver, and about 12 still moving their way through bronze from last year. But our first camp got washed away as a result of the flooding in Brisbane and the increasingly high dam levels, and it was just not going to happen. For me, the rescheduling becomes as problematic, but not from a financial sense, but I'm interested in unpacking that a bit more with Keith and Cherie. Trying to reschedule a 1 night, 2 day camp when you've got 30 students and your ratios are 1 to 7, and you're trying to definitely stay within those ratios, and you've got staffing issues, as in I need a teacher or an adult volunteer, sometimes a parent, to come with me, to reschedule it into another week anywhere in the calendar, which is fully scheduled out a year in advance, including all of their exam blocks. And so students don't want to be out on camp the weekend before the exam block, or they need to be at a sporting carnival that weekend, or they've got extracurricular. I'm now juggling many balls to try and look at the calendar for term 2, and we'll possibly be running camps right through the next 6 months in order to get a qualifying a practice and then a qualifying journey just on a basic 1 night bushwalking trip to be scheduled, because of the floods and because of the ongoing management. We're using SEQ water property at Wyalong Dam. So it's a free site, but it's publicly accessible to everybody. And obviously now with many weeks of it being washed away and closed to the public, there's going to be increased pressure, I guess, on that site in a competitive sense. So anyone got a further comment on Cherie's initial comment about the impact for financial and how that works within organizations?
Sorry, I was a little bit late. But one of the things I am noticing with both COVID and cancellation severe weather is that people are pushing boundaries and breaking or potentially breaking rules, yeah, including the AAS or parks guidelines to try and catch up with everything, yeah.
I suppose, David, just your comment in regards to rescheduling. We're prominently, obviously, working with schools, and their calendar is booked out. We're finding 18 months to 2 years now. They're looking ahead in some context, a well-organised school. One of the solutions that we've sort of been doing is looking at integrating or basically sharing 2 programs across the same date. So if staff's available, that's the big question. Where you got 2 smaller clients, potentially we've been moving those 2 together. If there's no probity issues or the school's happy to combine that. Normally we find state schools are pretty good with that in an area, especially if the executives sort of know each other. But that's one solution that we've sort of managed to try and say, hey, we only take up to groups up to 24, no bigger. We work on a 1:7 ratio. So, if we're sort of looking at a group of 7 and, a group of 14, we can combine those 2 programs as a solution. It just comes down to also parks with access. I know the NSW park booking process has caused us a little bit of headaches because it's all electronic these days. And you get halfway through a 2-day or halfway through a 4-day program, only to find your last date that you're entering into the system, that campground is booked. So it can be a little bit challenging to add kids onto a program or double up on that from a booking perspective. But that's sort of one way we've been managing those cancellations, or sorry, we've preferred not to call the word cancellation, postponement.
Kind of going along the idea of time to squeeze in programs is also the issue then of burnout, staff burnout. Like I said, we're a very small company, so we have limited staff, or basically it's mostly the owners. So then they're pushing up all their programs like back to back with each other, and that can cause a lot of just they get burned out and they get tired, and then that can lead to other issues in the long term. But I'm sure some of you are also facing that with limited staff and then having more issues with that going forward.
I don't know if people are aware, but at OutHaus Queensland, we've been running a survey for the last couple of weeks, looking at the impact of the suspension of school camps at the beginning of the year here in Queensland, and looking at what we thought would be the financial sort of burden that the sector would have to carry for the rest of the year. We did this so that we could then have sort of ammunition to take back to the education department of the government, looking for some sort of support. We haven't yet got an answer on whether that might be forthcoming or not. But we had about 15, I think, organisations responded to our survey, and from that we extrapolated what we thought, working on about 100 camps across the state, what we thought it might have cost, and the numbers are in the many millions of dollars across the sector over that fairly short period of time, in loss of income, loss of bookings because of postponement and the lack of available space for a postponed booking, and the loss of staff. Quite extraordinary numbers when you actually look at it in that way.
Yeah, it's a good comment, Mark. We had to rewrite, partly due to COVID, but completely rewrite our refund policy simply because there was a huge hole there with COVID, with postponements. And the problem with cancellation / postponements, as soon as you sort of move one and a date's not available, then people start coming back saying, well, hang on, you haven't been able to deliver based on the original date. I want a refund. And when that starts adding up very, very quickly, you start going, it's not viable. Put the program specific costs. So I think a lot of it does come back to having a solid refund policy in place also with that.
Yeah. We've had to do that as well. We've had to revamp our cancellation policy and refund policy, because with COVID and with all the weather and same thing, cancellations, like people are they can't make the new dates. And then what do you do? How far do you push them out into the future? I've got people from 2020 that we're still pushing out their dates that they paid in 2020, and now we're keep pushing them out, or they push themselves out as well. Like they can't make it. And how far into the future do you then carry those people over? It's starting to kind of become a issue for us, and from the admin side, which is mostly what I do, because then I have to find all those people when they say that they have money, and then make sure that it's all up and up and that they've done everything that they're supposed to do. And so yeah, that's definitely an issue for us as well.
Mark, could you speak to what the industry's been doing in Queensland, and Sree's in New South Wales, and obviously Keith is as well, and maybe David could offer some perspective from a Victorian location about the changes to policies as a result of the severe weather that we've been experiencing.
I'm not sure I can add much, to be honest, David. I'm sure that some of the actions that have been taken in New South Wales would have been taken by some organisations up here. Certainly floods and extreme weather are a sort of normal part of living in Queensland. So I guess historically people would have had some expectation and then some ways of dealing with those situations, going forward. But haven't heard too much feedback on any sort of significant changes at the moment.
Mr. Chitty, you want to jump in then?
Yeah, we're only small, of course, but watching around, we haven't had quite as much severe weather as you, except in the Gippsland side. So the Gippsland side's a bit, they get a lot more weather than us. But like my company, we don't take deposits anymore. Okay, so we don't take deposits. We bill people after we've put the money, because I'm finding some of the smaller operators, particularly with much cash flow, actually use the money, that they might have taken as deposits, and have trouble refunding it, if it's demanded along the way. So that's one of the ways we've changed things. We've lost 30 days in the last decade or two, and I figure I'm going to lose another 30 days to severe weather in the next couple of decades.
David, sorry, did you say you don't take deposits anymore? Have you had issues with people canceling last minute just because they feel like it, or is that been a problem?
Well, one of the things is while COVID was in and out of COVID, we had if COVID cancelled, like we just refunded all the money. We had a COVID refund policy, so we decided it was easier not to take the money in the first place. And we've got a good group of clients that we've had for years. So if we deliver, we'll get paid.
So is it perhaps, and this isn't a severe weather topic, but it's related, are organizations finding that with COVID numbers increasing across schools, that when numbers are dropping, either from students getting on the bus, so say in a traditional camp environment, Monday morning they've dropped by 25% because of an outbreak over the weekend or the week before, close contact rules have come into effect. How is that impacting the industry in the sector in terms of both program design? So I know at the moment I'm looking, as an example, I'm looking at an upcoming camp for some year 7s, and I've been told the minimum numbers in a group situation has to be 16 for safety of the actual activity. So in a case where it's a donkey ballet with a giant swing, they need 16 people to attend in that group. And if we don't have 16 because we've had a COVID outbreak in the lead into the program, they'll have to collapse 2 groups into one, which will have an interesting impact on both dynamics within the groups and also the ability of the school, in my case, to recognize that might be something we need to do. Is that happening in other locations? Are people got stories behind that? Again, it's a COVID question, not severe weather, but it's somewhat related.
Yeah, it's definitely happened for us at Log Cabin Camp. So we've had, over the last few years, lots of groups cancel last minute, or they've also had groups that have been smaller. So again, the challenge that you have designing that program, as well as you just have to have a conversation with the school or the group to say, hey, look, guys, like you haven't quite met our minimum numbers. We're going to have to change it up to how we deliver this to you, because safety wise, it's not going to work. And then you're going to have the other end of that as well, is that if you do have a giant swing and they want to have everyone done in an hour, it's like, well, if you've got more than that, it's just not possible. So then having to put the onus back on the group to say, hey, look, you're going to have to figure out what's priority to you. Like, we will be as flexible as we possibly can, but ultimately, you know, somewhere you're going to have to miss out, because you just can't have it all.
Keith, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so our COVID policy is 2 weeks. So cancellation within 2 weeks, no refund. It's been quite contentious for obvious reasons. There is a bit of flexibility case by case. We found COVID was being used a lot as an excuse where bad weather was coming up or predicted, where we had students just saying, hey, I'm not feeling too good. It's raining on the weekend. I feel like I got COVID, I'm not turning up. So that's why we sort of put the 2 week in there. When I mean it's flexibility, we are asking for proof of a positive test, if that makes sense, being a PCR test. And then we go case by case. So we go, okay, it's clear COVID. It's not a weather related, using COVID as an excuse cancellation. To sort of be fair, we make that pretty clear with the parents. In relations to bumping up numbers, yeah, we have definitely, our breakpoint numbers, we've definitely added an extra 2 onto that. As I said, we're using small groups because we are finding at the moment each week on a group of 14 kids, there'll be at least 2 kids that will get that 7-day isolation here in New South Wales because mum or dad's got it. They might necessarily have COVID, but they've still got to go into lockdown. So our minimum numbers from a booking perspective have definitely gone up. I'm sort of a bit worried because we've got a program coming up where we've sort of maxed out, but we've got an extra 2 kids in there, if that makes sense. I'm not too sure what I'm going to do there. But yeah, if that answers that question.
I might pivot the conversation back to severe weather and the impacts it has on the sector, I guess, in a wider sense. How are people finding from a perspective of staffing? Now, I've just recently been, it's sort of related to COVID, but I'm trying to keep the focus on severe weather. I was recently on a program I was coordinating, and we needed a certain number of staff, and we got half that number because of lack of staffing in Southeast Queensland. That's related to vaccination and pandemic related issues, and people having left the sector. But it was also related very much so to the recent lockout of outdoor ed until the 4th of March here in Queensland, and there's ongoing issues in South Australia and Western Australia I'm aware of. We haven't had the, we seem to, as a sector, be having a problem keeping our staff, whether that's young staff or older staff, I'm not sure. But are people finding that the severe weather issues that we've been having as a result of climate change or whatever you believe, is it happening in your area? Is it affecting your programming, your ability to get programs on the ground? Because I know it affected mine quite significantly, and we managed it, but I made for a different program.
Yeah, definitely for us, a lot of our, like I said, a lot of our participants and a lot of the staff or helpers that we get on our programs come from the northern New South Wales area, which has obviously been an issue for us. So we've had lots of people cancel out for that, just helping out because they've lost everything, or they just don't have the money when they're trying to rebuild and stuff like that. So we've definitely been affected.
Anybody else want to talk to staffing and how it's been affected by the local flooding?
I'll jump in. I think a lot of it also has to do with our ability to support staff during that cancellation side of that postponement. I sort of touched on it earlier. We as a company are moving away from using casuals as much as we can, just due to the surcharges and things associated with that, more looking from a full-time employment. But I know definitely where a casual is now on a program, and we do have that postponement, trying to at least offer them something in alternate, whether it's coming in and just spending a week in the shed, you know, cleaning up or doing general maintenance or something. Sometimes they take it. Sometimes they say, no, you know what, I'm not interested in coming in doing that. That's fine. I'll just lose out on 5 days pay. But at least trying to provide some options there, because otherwise we sort of found that, you know, you have 3 or 4 cancellations and it just happens to be the unlucky casual, then they're reluctant to book work in with you as an organization, although it's out of your hands. And with the industry, I hate using the word shortage. I don't know if there's a shortage or if it's something else that's causing issues at the moment, but definitely just trying to keep staff that are engaged with your organization working, if that makes sense.
I would agree with you on that point too, Keith. Like with our staff, we definitely try to have those options of keeping them around for maintenance. And again, it's always that challenge of if they do find something else during that quiet time, but they're taking the option because obviously they know that they're getting work, because everyone does have to pay the bills. But I think also the other thing too was just checking on people's mental health as well. I mean, if you've got people that are they're uncertain about their work circumstances, definitely being able to help people through that process helps keep them on board too, because if they feel valued as an employee, then, you know, they're going to value you as an employer.
I think that resonates with everyone here. Tegan, can you just mention where you're based and who you're working for, just so everyone has an understanding if you're doing expedition or centre-based stuff?
Yeah, so I work at a hardtop camp. So in a bit of a role transition at the moment. So I've been program coordinator for our staff here for the last 3 years, and we had a turnover of staff. We've got a very small team. We are expanding our site to have a smaller second site to just also deal with the influx, as you guys have been mentioning, with schools wanting to book in, and then you've got turnovers and still trying to fill those places from 2 years ago with bookings, to try and facilitate having those smaller schools come in, and particularly with the government giving the extra funding for smaller groups that haven't been able to come on board due to financial reasons. It's been quite full on, and then trying to train those new staff in the process to try and meet the demand now, as I'm sure we're all facing, stepping back into full swing that everything's starting to open as well.
Thanks for that. Excellent. David Chitty wrote in the, probably posed as a question, how useful is the updated severe weather guidance note in the Australian Activity Adventure Standards Framework in planning for severe weather? I can't really speak to it very much because whilst I'm aware of all those standards and I try and abide by those in the program that I run at Somerset College, a lot of the stuff we do is guided by, I guess, internal SOPs and a lot of experience. And sometimes it's hard to, when you're aware that severe weather is forecast in the next week or within the time frame of your program, to actually go back to those fairly dry documents and then to apply those. How are people managing on the ground planning or upfront planning about severe weather and looking at it? And I'll give an example from my recent experience with the Year 7s. We got washed out due to the floods in February. We're outsourcing that program to an organisation at Mount Tamborine, very large company, and they were fairly flexible in that regards, and we were proactive in moving our dates really quickly to the next available date. But programmatically, it went from what was a 4-day program traditionally that the school runs to the only dates they could give us was 3 days. So it definitely reduced the program by a day for the students. Well, it will when it runs in June. It will impact on the evening activities because usually it was 3 evenings. Now there's only 2 evenings. And then it will impact on the time of year we're programming because we take them out and we put them in tents. So 12-year-olds in tents in June is much different to 12-year-olds in tents in February. So all those factors of considerations I'm now looking at in the risk management program and the way we're approaching this different, very different camp. Same venue, same activity, same sort of 90-minute rotations of giant swings and mountain biking and bushcraft, but the environmental aspects will be very different, and the length of time of the program makes the tone of the program potentially very different as well. So that's an example I've got. Do other folks have other examples?
Not so much an example, David, but the AAST and the severe weather document aren't designed to be something you go to with severe weather coming. They're documents that are designed to help you put together your own SOPs and own policies well before you have to actually deal with any live situations.
And I might add that they're listed now by Safe Work Australia. Yeah, the adventure activity standards. One of the speakers at OutHaus New South Wales recently from there said that that's one of the sets of documents that they would expect our industry to use, in their planning. So they're being more and more accepted as the lead documents for our organisational planning and strategic and operational.
Just, I'm just curious. There's what, 7, 8 people on the call here. How many people are aware of and have used or referred to the AAS? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's actually fairly unusual. We on some of the sort of ad hoc surveys we've run the last little while, it's usually about 15, maybe 20% that haven't heard of, or if they have, they never used them, which is a bit scary when David, your comments about Safe Work Australia. These are going to be becoming more and more vital and necessary going forward, I think.
I think it's I think the problem with the sector is finding the time where this is important work, not urgent work. So when you've got the urgent work of the next camp and the next Duke of Ed program and the next thing that's happening on the calendar next week, that takes all the time and energy out of a program coordinator's role. The important work of referring back to a severe weather guidance, referencing that in your SOP, and then implementing that as part of your on-the-ground process, whether it's, what does a severe weather protocol look like for being in a tent in an electrical storm at an isolated spot where you can't find physical shelter. And actually having that written down in your SOP and your risk management, but then actually training your staff. Now, whether your staff are outdoor educators, outdoor recreationists, or teachers who are running the program, that's another huge leap in management buy-in to, one, find the time and the resources, and acknowledging that that's an issue. And I know, coming from working in Victoria for 10 years, where it was all about bushfire safety and another severe weather effectively. I had lots and lots of training on bushfire management or bushfire recognition. And anytime I now see smoke in the distance when I'm on program, I'm on the phone to somebody, I'm looking up websites. But in Queensland, it's not as big an issue, even though 2 years ago we definitely were affected, as it is in Victoria or New South Wales, because of the nature of the environment and the changes. It's just a statement. It's not really reflective in here, but
this is a good work to be doing with all these postponements and weather-affected cancellations. You've got time to go and do all this stuff.
Yeah. No, it's when I'm on the phone trying to rebook for the school. My boss says that's what I have to do and we've definitely found here in Queensland, there's now a crunch, and it probably is equivalent in other states, a crunch of calendar dates. If you're trying to get your calendar moved 6 months in advance, you might find that that's already happened. It happened last week again. NAPLAN moved their dates for 3, 5, 7, and 9 for online NAPLAN exams. And that impacted directly on our Year 9 camp that we just ran. So it was straight away on the phone to the provider and the 3 venues going, I need new dates in term 1 right now so I can lock it in with the calendar for 2023, so that we can make sure that program is still going to move and still be what we're doing. Keith, jump in there.
Yeah, talking about the AEST framework and the ability to design, I think it's really important to have that definitive line in the sand. We sort of run it as 2 processes: pre-program severe weather plan, and then a during program. When we sort of look at the pre-program side of things, it's pretty much ours is black and white. If there's a severe weather warning of any form within the program venue location for the period of program, it's postponed. It's as simple as that. You just don't go. The big complexities or things or the challenges is once you're on program. We do use a weather consultant occasionally for some of our bigger programs with forward planning with more remote stuff. And even he will tell you at the moment with the current weather patterns, the reliability in a lot of the reporting is incredibly challenging and infactual. You only have to see what the government's going through with boom and the responses to flooding and the government's responsible. We didn't anticipate that severity. So having a weather consultant on hand has been good for us occasionally where, you know, we're sitting in the office in Sydney and we've got a program in Arnhem Land or we've got a program in the Blue Mountains, our backyard, but, you know, not knowing what's particularly going on local there, having that ability to have someone that's just watching over to go, hey, just a heads up, this has popped up on my system. We're looking 4 or 5 hours away. Has for us been a couple of times been the difference between of getting stuck in something pretty nasty compared to getting back to the bus or getting back to a hut or getting back to a hard top sort of facility, and then using your technology like InReaches to communicate those instructions. But again, it goes back to that hard rule. Like we've got it down to if the forecast venue is higher than 33 degrees Celsius with a humidity of X, the program's postponed. Especially working with 14-year-old kids in a remote location, heat stroke, heat stress, and all those other things. So it's important to have using that AEST framework and putting that document in place and having those hard points in there and also following them.
Sorry?
I was just thinking too, one of the big effects that I would assume that a lot of the weather would have is in our stewardship of the land as outdoor educators, and especially with like heavy rain, often affects, you know, mountain biking, or it might affect a hiking area, you know, with heavy use of it, especially if we're now cramming more programs in less amount of space with more people in the same areas, how that might then affect the environment long-term in kind of wearing down and eroding certain areas, or just whether then do you still do mountain biking then if you know it's going to be really wet there and it could affect the area, just as an example.
It's a great question. I consciously battle that one at the moment, especially with a lot of the trails being pretty wet. Now, saying that, in the school holidays, we do have what was meant to be a traditional bushwalk program, but it's actually going out as helping actually repair some of the trails in a local national park. So we sort of contacted Parks NSW and said, you know, we had a program, you're still closed due to fires originally, now flood. We wanted to go ahead, is there anything we can do? And they said, oh, if you're happy to come out and just help do some trail maintenance with a ranger for 2 days, that'd be amazing with 10 kids. So that was a bit of a win, but that just came out of the blue the other week.
That's awesome. That's a great way to kind of just go with the flow and give back as well. Like, that's really good.
I think something in a medium-term risk is, because we're getting more severe weather and we're learning to live around it, we have to be careful in the future that we don't put ourselves in a position like happened in New Zealand, Joe, where we get a flash flood, or in that cave flooding a few decades ago down in Tasmania where a stack of school kids got killed, Joe. So, I mean, there is a risk of an increased risk if we don't watch our P's and Q's and our risk management.
That was a really interesting case study, and definitely recommend it. If you haven't read about the, I can't remember which gorge it was in, but it was very impactful for the outdoor ed community in New Zealand, and had a whole bunch of factors. Sorry, what was it, Mark?
Mangatapopo Gorge, near the Outdoor Pursuit Centre in the Central North Island.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find the case study and post it in the chat for those who are not aware of it, but most people here probably would be. Rob's got his hand up. Rob, jump in, please.
Yeah, g'day. Thanks, David. Yeah, so a very specific question. I work on a hardtop camp, and we've got a ropes course. It's situated near the top of a hill, and, you know, it's the first activity that we shut down if there's lightning nearby or the winds are getting up to a certain point. I'm curious to hear, beyond the fairly broad guidance in the AEST and the just looking at that updated note, what do other people use as their trigger points for specifically for a ropes course? At what point do they?
I'll jump in for a quick, because I've got a big ropes course background. It's probably not written down in any specific standard, but it would be the 30 by 30 rule. If you can hear thunder, is it hear thunder, or sorry, see lightning, and which one was it? I can't remember. It's within 30 kilometer zone within a 3 or 4 second window. There's a football one that's used in footballing environments, certainly in Queensland, where if you're able to count to 4 and you can hear the thunder, you're definitely needing to find shelter and get off the field. I haven't seen though any particular ones in the past that's been written down. A lot of it's I guess common sense, and I've been on ropes courses where it hasn't been thundering, but it's been hammering down so badly with rain that it's been definitely time to get off and find shelters, because the experience is, one, slippery but unsafe, but also now unpleasant to be having in the educational outcomes. David, you got one?
Yeah, I think that setting a wind speed that you're comfortable with, regarding the safety of the equipment plus tree fall and everything else, be a bit conservative with that. And again, with rain, how that might affect. The other thing, of course, we've got these days is, depending where you are, we've got fairly good radar. So you can actually watch where the storms are coming a little bit. I mean, it might be harder for the person that's actually running, but someone in the office might well be able to keep an eye on what the storms are doing, where they're moving. Are they moving through your area, or are they going to go around you? I mean, it's only a bit of guess, but at least it gives you a bit of a feel for whether you should, because you really need to get away before the damn things get there, and they can jump you pretty quickly.
I've definitely been caught out on being actually out in the field for an outward bound program where we were remote and in wilderness, and it was definitely having I had my little notepad, my little SOP document, but going back to my route training in my early years and going, are all the tents not under trees? Are they all separated? And then instructing the group of boys I was with, young men, to please sit on your firmrest or on your mattress, and huddle in place and don't leave the tent until such time as the storm passes. And it was one of those classic sort of late afternoon, 3 o'clock, wickedly violent storms that just comes and approaches, but you can see it. And I think reading the weather as part of your bag of tricks as a field professional, as an outdoor ed professional, is one of the biggest things you should keep sharpening and reminding yourself how to interpret weather and how to see a front coming at you, and not trying to get the extra K to get to a base camp to find shelter if you need to stop right there and shelter in place whilst a front or a storm cell comes through. It's very relevant here in Queensland, but this was down in I think Victoria back in the day. Has anyone else experienced those or been caught out in severe weather as a outdoor practitioner?
Yeah, thanks for those contributions, Dave and David. It's it's good to hear much of the same stuff as we already use, and I think, as you mentioned, a little bit of operator discretion thrown in there as well. As you say, Dave, we've got a site where it's only possible to check the radar from the office, and so that relies on comms from the office to program staff, and so we've got to have a bit of nous while we're running things, that if it's starting to look too hairy, we can it, and that's our call to make. I've certainly had a few lightning drills out on walks in the Victorian high country where we've been en route to camp and the weather's poor, but not poor enough to stay in place. We set off towards our destination, crossing a high point that's you know, the only practical way to get from A to B, and lightning comes in, and yeah, we've all just sat on our packs with a bit of distance around. And I've thought in one or two of those instances, could we have avoided this without radar in hand and without using lightning tracker at the time? It was pretty difficult to anticipate it beyond what we could see and hear as far as the gaps. So I think we did the right thing by retreating as much as we could and then doing.
Keith, you want to jump in?
I'd be curious to know what applications or technologies or web-based software programs, websites that people are using. I know obviously we use the government site Boom a fair bit. There's a lot in there that you can obviously dig quite deep into, you know, river heights and all sorts of things. And we use Lightning Tracker.org and Null Earth and Predict Wind. But is there any other applications or softwares or things that people are using that might want to share?
I'll kick off. I'm probably a little bit behind in the time, even though I'm a big tech guy. I love Weather Pro. I use that quite a bit, and it just has a lot of, again, all of these sites and all these apps, I think, are just getting most of the same sources that are coming out of the bomb. In some cases, it's been curated by hopefully an expert with a meteorological background, but it gives me really good radar and forecast and observation history, and there's a whole bunch of other things. Other people? No one else uses anything else, or everyone's trying to think what they're using? Oh, yeah, Rob's got it. So Rob said in the chat, the Vic Emergency app, my Lightning Tracker app. So I'll see if we can find some links for that. For emergency service volunteers, the SAS app gives alerts in place of a pager, which is great. There's also, and I think I've got it on my phone now. Everyone's now looking at their phones for what apps they've got. I had a excellent app that was an emergency services notification app, but I can't remember what it is.
Emergency Plus.
Yeah, Emergency Plus. That was the one. Yeah, yeah. Not so much related to weather, but definitely as a way to you know, geolocate me or my group if I needed an emergency evac. My organization uses NReach, Garmin NReach GPSs, and I find them amazing bits of technology, but also quite challenging to manage as a group. I have 7 of them for a large range of usages, and managing them as a single entity, as a group through their portal is problematic at times and could be better, but it does give me the ability to sit at a base camp, as I've done last year, look at where a certain group is walking, notice that they're going the wrong direction, and send them a text message via satellite going, do you need help? Are you going in the wrong direction? Are you certain you're on the right path? And I got some funny messages back, but yeah, 20 minutes later when the satellite synced up, they were back on the right track and moving in the right direction. So a little bit big brother in that regards, but it's definitely a fantastic usage of technology to allow management and support of groups in the field, and especially if you're if you've got staff who are struggling with the location, or they haven't had a recce, or their skills maybe aren't as much as it is. Tracer Talks, Tracer Tracks for InReach. Keith, you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, so we have around, I think, close to 20, if not nearly 25 units with satellite tracking, and Tracer Tracks is a good back-end management system. You can assign the device to a user. You can also have in-field direct messaging. So where UHF radios aren't applicable, you can get members communicating via text and email between the devices. But one of the new tools with a lot of the new smart Garmin devices is the ability to share data or document. So from a weather perspective, you can obviously share like a weather map or a screenshot you know, from your office console where you got someone managing those devices to staff. We use that a lot. As soon as we have a severe weather warning come up in program venue or a change in weather, significant change, you can email basically one message out to all of those devices. So you're not doing, you know, 7, 8, 10 different messaging, and they can reply all back to that same console as well. So it's good just from the communication side, but most of the time we're communicating is when there's a change in weather. Giving that update.
Tegan, jump in.
I was just going to ask Keith, just on that note. So have you got individual devices that you give out to each of your staff members? Is there any way that that message could be sent to each person's mobile, or is that the device?
No, so it gets sent directly to the device. With the Garmin inReaches, you can have a Bluetooth app that can use their phone for the messaging function. I don't like it because it does drain the batteries a lot quicker with the Bluetooth device activated. You'd message straight out of the device. It's like using an old Nokia, if that makes sense, with the old messaging function. But yeah, you can directly message from a base contact, someone in the office, to a single device, multiple devices. You can even have working groups. So if you've got 5 or 6 different programs out over the same weekend and they're in 4 or 5 different locations, you can set a working group and just, you know, communicate to those guys that are paddling, because there's a severe wind warning for that program venue compared to the group that is, you know, inland hiking.
Definitely. No, that's really cool. And do you source them from their website, or did you just buy them in bulk? Like, how did you go about that?
Well, yeah, we're lucky because our other company is actually a supplier of them, so we have a demo. So yeah, so it's sort of yeah, it's good, but yeah, it's they work quite nicely. You can buy them straight from Garmin. Pivotal is the importer or the main distributor of Tracer Tracks and Garmin in Australia, so they're a good point of call.
Would you be able to pop that in a chat link?
Yep.
That'd be awesome. Thanks. They're like that. First I've ever heard of them, but they sound fantastic.
Yeah, they got to get it on the Tracer Tracks back end if you use that, which I think, David, you must be using the Garmin back end for your devices.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately just using the explore.garmin.com website, and management of 7 devices.
7 logins.
I can't even get them to sync up one set of tracks or routes. So I've got a consistency, because when I use them as a group, because I usually send out 6 or 7 groups all at once. I do love the functionality, and I found even though on a shorter program, the Garmin's will drain batteries, but the teacher's ability to use it like their regular phone through the app, I think that takes a lot of that scariness out of it for my clients, at least, in terms of them feeling they've got to be able to use a really clunky old Nokia type screen on the Garmin, whereas if on their phone they can receive messages and they can reply to messages and it's just synced up. I do like that function, but I do acknowledge it does drain batteries, but it's usually not a problem for me too much.
You know, talking about, the weather side with the Garmin inReaches, one of the things I do like is the ability to geofence a location too. So if you've got severe weather warning coming in, if you've got a geofence set up from a management perspective, with that geofence, I know that they've made camp. And if I'm looking at weather coming in that night, I know they're at camp, or I know they've made it back to the bus. So the geofencing function that you can use with Tracer Tracks is really useful for that peace of mind that, do I need to contact them now? Where are they? Oh, actually, no, I've got a message and email. They got back to the bus 2 hours ago. They're on the road.
Excellent. I've never heard of that, so I'm definitely going to have to investigate and have a look at that. Any other comments or questions about severe weather? And it's been a really roving conversation, which I thought it would be today. Anyone else got anything else to offer or share before we?
Sorry.
So go ahead, Tegan. No, it's just probably more important than mine.
I just had a question, just in regard, like, I guess Rob, this will also apply to you, is how have you gone with your programs and then managing a site after a flood event? So we had flash flooding here in Creswick in January. We had 160 mil in an hour. We had about 80 Jewish girls on site, and we thankfully swapped our program around so they had the the activities the day before, but we still had to manage, obviously, 80 students on staff, and then the power was gone out. So thankfully we had gas, so they were still all fed. But then obviously the next day we were just very fortunate that they were leaving that day, but the aftermath and cleaning up was quite horrendous as well. Just wanted to hear the thoughts of people, you know, and I guess this applies to people in the field as well. I mean, like the track's there one day and then the next it's not, because you just had a flash flooding an event. And, you know, it has been a 1 in a 10-year event for us. But, you know, after seeing what's happening in Queensland as well, like this could be definitely a lot more frequent. And then moving forward, how we're going to respond and being proactive around these kind of situations.
Tegan, I'll jump in. I haven't actually dealt with a flood through a centre that I've managed, but I have definitely dealt with a fire destroying the site that I previously managed. And you mentioned that, you touched on it earlier. I think outside of you know, the immediate needs of evacuating people back to their home locations, supporting staff to get safely out of the field and securing your site, it's definitely the mental health aspects of supporting your staff and the owners of the business, or the clients even, who might have a strong relationship with the organization. The fires in Victoria in 2009 destroyed a campsite that I'd managed for about 3 years, and I'd spent weekends sweating blood and tears, mowing lawns and constructing stuff. And I hadn't managed the centre for several years, but the fire went through, and it was near Buxton, and destroyed the entire site. And I wasn't able to get access to the site for a long time until they opened up the zone after the fires. And it was shattering to me as an outdoor educator to see all the things that I'd developed and built over the years completely just destroyed and obliterated. Yeah, wasn't so upset that the ropes course was gone, because it was old and on its way out, but and needed to be retired. But yeah, it was really traumatic, and I didn't actually estimate how upset that would make me at the time. But so I would definitely suggest a flood event is even more realistic, because it's not going to destroy everything. It's just going to make everything really dirty and make it really hard to work, I guess. But and having to reset a lot of stuff and a lot of systems. I'd be reaching out to whatever support networks you've got, perhaps something like inside the OutHaus and your state bodies, about finding support mechanisms and not underestimating that impact on your staff, especially on those first couple of programs where they've got to go back into the zone or back into the venue and run programs again, because it's going to look different. I know from bushfire experience walking through fire affected areas, the trails are all gone. That spot that old gnarly tree that normally is there is your key point for turning left, not turning right, is gone. So recognizing that you might need to do a recce, you might need to definitely reconsider and reevaluate the camping under or near trees. And that's something that's come out of definitely fires, but also flood affected areas in southeast Queensland. Do you trust that tree that's been flood affected now to be strong enough to still stand and and still have groups camping underneath there? Anyone else? As I'm recognizing we're coming to the top of the hour, but this is a pretty important topic.
Yeah, back to what you were saying, Tegan, about that centre-based context and dealing with severe weather interrupting program. We've had a few disruptions at our camp in Malmesbury, also Central Victoria, and though we haven't had a flood like you described, we've had some times where we've had to recognise that the staff are coping okay with the disruption. Students and teachers can be at a much higher level of stress, and so we've spoken about having I guess it's a strategic level of honesty and transparency, whereby we're honest about, hey, we can't run this because the weather's not allowing it, but what we are going to do instead is this. These are the measures we've got in place to manage this. Do you need anything else to feel okay about the program? That sort of thing. And so, not giving an overwhelming quantity of options or information for that matter, but yeah, being there to respond to their stress. And yeah, we've had that recently. But also a really thorough debrief helps big time with those, as with any event. We've been building on that, just wrapping up every program with a debrief of sorts, and particularly if there's events, disruptions that have come up, we've debriefed that and what worked well, what can we do better next time, and who needs support.
Yeah, I definitely echo that as well. A critical incident debrief would be what you'd be looking at. It's not a death in the field, but a major environmental event or a severe weather event could be seen at that level based upon your audience that you're dealing with. So it's not just the teachers or the students on the ground, it's what the parents are feeling or hearing through social media or the mass media incorrectly, usually in most cases, what the school knows, what the greater school community understands and knows about that. So having that ability to either run it on the ground, but then maybe following up with another meeting, whether that's an assembly with the cohort or maybe just with some key teachers at the school afterwards, about this is what we saw happen, this is how we managed it, and this is where this is the outcomes from that event. And again, reaching out to qualified and really well experienced people in the industry. If you've not got the knowledge how to run that within your own organization, reach out to people like Mark Squires and myself, because we know the right people in the industry who can point you in those directions, who have experienced running critical incident responses. It's 16 past the hour. It's been an amazingly interesting and engaging conversation. Thank you very much. I'm not going to hold up any more time. We'll be back again. Possibly not at Easter. I think I've worked out we've got one scheduled for Easter Monday, so we'll probably bump that to the following week or into April, May. So May already. But thank you very much for attending today. I'll stop the recording at this point and we'll continue the chat. Thanks very much.